By the 1530s, the English state was operating on the edge of insolvency. Behind the royal pageantry, Henry VIII was an executive managing a government with an empty treasury and staggering structural deficits. The expenditures were massive and heavily weighted toward royal vanity. The king maintained a sprawling personal armory containing 6,500 handguns and decorated his palaces with a collection of 2,000 custom tapestries. Beyond the domestic spending, the logistical costs of foreign military adventure drained the state's reserves. Funding the Royal Navy required immense capital, and campaigns like the Siege of Boulogne eventually carried a price tag of £650,000. When Henry inherited the throne, his famously frugal father left him a massive surplus of £1.25 million. Within 2 decades, the son evaporated that entire fortune. The result was a severe sovereign debt crisis. The state lacked the tax revenue to service its obligations, threatening to paralyze the operations of the English government. A monarch possessing absolute political power but lacking capital is inherently unstable. To maintain authority and avoid bankruptcy, the Tudor state had to extract new wealth by any means necessary. This map illustrates the only entity in England wealthy enough to balance the king's deficit: the monastic institutions of the Roman Catholic Church, which controlled roughly 25% of the national landmass. These religious houses were self-sustaining economic powerhouses. They generated immense independent revenue streams through parish tithes, agricultural rents, and pilgrimage offerings. To access this wealth, Henry VIII elevated Thomas Cromwell to solve the crown's balance sheet. A ruthless, unsmiling administrative executive, Cromwell approached the task with the cold pragmatism of a corporate liquidator. Cromwell's strategy for the crown was highly methodical. He planned to execute the largest state-sponsored corporate liquidation in English history. He recognized that the crown could not simply steal the land. Instead, he would use the machinery of Parliament and statutory law to systematically overwrite centuries of established property rights. The English Reformation operated as a massive fiscal maneuver, a hostile state takeover designed to extract wealth and transfer it directly to the royal treasury. The first rule of corporate liquidation is valuation. A state must precisely quantify an asset before it can legally seize it. In 1535, Cromwell deployed royal commissioners across the country. Their mandate was to conduct a highly organized, ruthless national audit of every piece of church property. This visualization represents the Valor Ecclesiasticus, the resulting comprehensive ledger that documented the exact taxable value of every single religious house in the realm. This financial intelligence stripped the church of its historic opacity. Cromwell now possessed exact figures, identifying every vulnerable institution generating less than £200 annually. The data from this audit provided the necessary empirical justification to draft the first wave of expropriation laws. The Crown now knew exactly what the assets were worth. The Valor Ecclesiasticus converted untouchable holy sites into quantifiable, targetable line items on a royal balance sheet. For the first time, the English state possessed a detailed map of exactly how much wealth the church held and where they kept it. Armed with exact valuations, Cromwell transitioned from intelligence gathering to legal expropriation, with the First Suppression Act of 1536, targeting smaller houses like Dorchester Abbey. The Crown claimed administrative impropriety and a failure to maintain religious life as the legal pretext to dissolve these smaller, vulnerable houses. The larger monasteries were technically left intact, isolating the weak from the strong. Having established the legal precedent, Cromwell developed an escalation tactic to target the wealthier institutions that had survived the first wave. He weaponized the Treason Act of 1534. He made it clear that any abbot who refused to surrender their property could be executed, effectively holding the institution's leadership hostage. This triggered a rapid transition. Fear-induced voluntary surrenders flooded into the government, culminating in the total compulsory absorption of all remaining monasteries by 1539. Cromwell's genius lay in his administrative cover. He engineered a brilliant veneer of strict statutory legality to mask a campaign of absolute state extortion. Paper ownership of real estate did not solve the deficit. The Crown needed immediate liquid capital, prompting the rapid physical destruction of the seized properties. Royal agents methodically catalogued and extracted high-value, transportable items. Solid gold chalices and silver plate and precious manuscript bindings were loaded into carts and sent to London. They targeted lucrative pilgrimage sites and saints' tombs to extract centuries of hoarded wealth, treating deeply venerated shrines solely as deposits of jewelry and raw gold. After the interiors were stripped, the industrial-scale destruction of the abbey infrastructures began. Royal workers systematically unroofed the buildings to harvest the highly valuable lead. Church bells and lead framing were thrown into royal smelting furnaces on the abbey grounds, melted down to produce easily transportable ingots of raw bullion. The official theological directive to destroy idolatry was functionally executed as an industrial-scale asset-stripping operation to generate immediate state revenue. This physical extraction created a massive bureaucratic bottleneck. How does a government process, manage, and resell a sudden influx of real estate equal to a quarter of the entire nation? To manage this windfall, Cromwell created a specialized government agency known as the Court of Augmentations. This flowchart illustrates the agency's structure, operating outside traditional finance ministries with its own chancellor, auditors, and receivers. First, auditors produced particulars to appraise the confiscated land's exact value. Next, commissioners approved these particulars, establishing the final, non-negotiable purchase price for secular buyers. The Court of Augmentations functioned as the ultimate state laundering machine. It efficiently turned stolen ecclesiastical property into legitimate, taxable, secular real estate. Cromwell's operation was an immense financial success. It generated £150,000 in immediate annual revenue and transferred £120,000 a year in crown lands to the state. Yet, Henry VIII suffered from a fatal flaw in executive management. In the 1540s, he squandered this structural windfall on renewed military campaigns in France and Scotland. When the stolen cash ran out, the Crown resorted to desperate fiscal measures. They initiated a rapid fire sale of the newly acquired monastic lands, dumping the assets at market prices to fund the armies. To bridge the remaining deficit, the state deployed the policy of currency debasement. The royal mints systematically reduced the silver content of the currency, replacing it with cheap copper. As a direct result of this debasement, the English pound halved in value against international currencies. This toxic combination of rapid asset liquidation and intentional currency debasement triggered runaway inflation. It punished the English economy and impoverished the working class for decades. The sacred purpose of the monastic landscape was replaced by a secular, privatized reality. Abbeys were converted into aristocratic country estates by the buyers, who capitalized on the Court of Augmentations. These sales triggered a permanent societal shift. The massive transfer of manorial property created a powerful new class of landed gentry. Acquiring these freehold estates entrenched these local families. Their wealth, feudal rights, and social status became entirely dependent on the survival of the Tudor regime. This localized economic power ensured that returning the lands to the Catholic Church would be politically impossible. When Queen Mary attempted to restore the monasteries years later, her own nobility refused to surrender their real estate. Glastonbury's ruins stand as a monument to administrative expropriation. The English Dissolution achieved its goals through the meticulous application of statutory law and the calculated threat of state-sanctioned violence. Henry VIII's ultimate legacy was a violent, bureaucratic transfer of wealth. By absorbing a quarter of the nation's land into specialized administrative bodies, the Crown replaced the informal household rule of the Middle Ages with the formalized machinery of a central state.